today's half hour with American Auto. With us today is the star of the show, Anna Gasteyer, who plays Katherine Hastings. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get started, can you give us an overview of the show in your own words?
Sure. I would say it's a half-hour comedy written out of the NBC tradition of a workplace comedy with that DNA. It's set in the automotive industry at a large American automotive company, Payne Motors. And I play Katherine Hastings, the new female CEO, which is a little bit of a trailblazing part in that culture. And I don't know anything about cars. I come from big pharma. I understand, things that might fall in a gray area ethically, but I don't really care for mechanics or the details of selling cars. So
I can absolutely relate. Before we go any further, let's take a look at a clip from the show.
Great.
So on the 15th, you have an interview with Auto Week, and then do you want to do anything with this roller rink thing?
What roller rink thing?
A roller rink in the boonies was doing a family's day and turned away a family with 2 moms.
I mean, not to sound heartless, I obviously want gay families to enjoy roller skating as much as the rest of us, but what does this have to do with us?
Well, everyone expects companies to be social advocates these days. I mean, I was admonished by my coffee cup this morning for not having neutered my dog.
Actually, I stopped eating Fritos after that balloon boy thing.
What did Fritos do?
I don't really remember. I just stuck to it.
I just don't see how donating to some charity moves the needle on the elusive dream of roller rink equality.
It's not a donation. Most companies are just tweeting a rainbow square.
A rainbow square, that's it?
Well, it's virtue signaling. I didn't post one.
No, well, I mean, you got a free pass, don't you? You probably didn't even have to post a black square when everyone was doing that.
Oh, so lucky.
Yes, being a gay black man in America is, as they say, a breeze.
I'm actually really upset he hasn't neutered his dog.
I mean, there was some Twitter outcry. Listen, I mean, that's what I love about the show. And you can say what you want to say. Of course, I didn't mean to just jump right into it. But what I love about that clip and about that episode is, this to sort of add to the idea of an NBC workplace comedy. It's really very much a workplace comedy in 2022. I feel like it deals very directly with social and political issues and the ethical issues that corporations kind of painfully wrestle with, and not well for the most part. So it is a lot of virtue signaling. This episode is my favorite of the first season. It's a runaway train of, people being really bad at being good. And I think that's what the show tries to capture, that kind of obsession with looking good, but also, making a lot of money in the meanwhile. So
Right.
It's set in the C-suite. It's the first comedy of that style, of that nature, that we're making fun of the top floor and the human beings that make those decisions, the very human beings that make those big, fat corporate bottom line decisions. And Katherine cares a lot about money and about her, stock options.
And American Auto comes to us from Justin Spitzer, who, speaking of like office comedies, he worked on The Office and he created the show Superstore. Were you familiar with his work prior to signing on?
I was, and it had a lot to do with why I obviously wanted, the script was fantastic for the pilot. So it was a very easy yes, in terms of reading material that makes you laugh out loud and in pilot season when you're wading through things, but I love ensemble work as a human and a performer. But Justin, I knew he spent 10 years in the writer's room at The Office. So, I knew that he would have an incredible sense of collaboration and before creating Superstore, which went on for 6 years. So, and he talks about this pretty openly, which I really love too, having written for Superstore for so long, which is about the people impacted by the guys upstairs. He wanted to sort of flip that narrative and look upstairs at the people, the decision makers. And so it's a cool point of view, because these massive decisions that impact so many thousands of people, consumers and everybody below the C-suite, basically, that have to, work on behalf of the company.
That's so cool. I never thought of it, but it is a companion piece. I'd like to think it's set in the same universe as Superstore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a way, there are obviously differences between the two things, but he cares a lot about the characters that he creates, and he cares a lot about social and political issues from lots of different points of view. So
I love that Katherine was a pharmaceutical CEO who becomes CEO of an automotive company. I feel like that just tells you so much right there about the character.
Yeah.
What were sort of your initial impressions of the script and of her?
she obviously comes from the school of thought. She's clearly like a smart MBA lady who feels that you don't need to know the product, you just need to know how to sell it, which is a very popular and sound management style. But it also makes her inherently dependent upon the people that she has under her employ. So I get to sort of lord my power over them, but also there's a tension of needing a lot of information from them and being heavily reliant upon them. So from an ensemble standpoint, that's just fun because there's a tension built in there. Well, what's great about it is you do have these sort of, especially with cars, you know, we have in American Auto, this very tangible, practical product in some ways that you're selling. And she comes from a very ethically gray background, and she's very okay with that. But what's cool is the way the stories start to get told. In the first season, for example, we have an issue with these locking paws and the possibility that we may have to do a massive recall. But Justin very shrewdly and through Katherine writes from the point of view of someone who's just starts to see human beings and cost of a human life as an actuary would, which is just purely financial. Like at a certain point, you're like, well, how many people are going to die and how expensive is it? And will it be more expensive if we're sued? And what are the PR costs? And it's just sort of cynical and horrifying. But for somebody who's come from an industry that is known as, you know, with which we view as cynically as pharma, it's a fun application of her value system. You know what I mean?
Did you have to take on any special research to play her, or did you model her on anyone?
Well, so my husband works in advertising, and I have been exposed to my fair share of female CEOs and female CMOs. And there's definitely, it's still a really emerging population. I mean, even in 2022, we only have 8% of Fortune 500 companies run by women at this point. So there is a lot of sort of swagger that I find admirable, but also pretty funny about women at the top, because I definitely think for Katherine, in particular, she's, you know, I'm in my 50s. She probably didn't come up like a big part of the sisterhood. And now all of a sudden times have changed and has to really get behind fellow female, you know, leadership. And so I think it's kind of this, like, it's fun to watch this type of character have to adapt to the sort of feminist Fight Club mentality out of the like Sheryl Strandberg lean in mentality. Do you know what I mean? Like there's sort of two different styles of leadership, all for one and all for all, you know?
I love that actually she doesn't know anything about cars, because I think that would be the hardest thing to research and try and talk about.
You mean as a performer?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, I'm embarrassed to say, it's not very far away from me. I mean, I grew up in the city, so I don't really like, I would be a terrible witness, like, or, you know, if I had saw a hit and run, I'd be like, well, it was a car, the sedan, this is for a station wagon, you know, like, I mean, to me, that's how it is. So I very similarly don't know that much. And people are passionate about cars, you know, that's a real fervor for them out there. So it also makes me laugh because you can tell it's a value that people don't take lightly, you know?
I don't know if a lot of actors talk about how sometimes they can't help but take a little bit of their character home with them. I don't know if you like being Katherine. There are things about her that I think it would be really cool to just like be so no nonsense and to like sort of be the boss, you know?
Yes, I don't take that home with me because I'm very aware all the time of what everybody's feeling. And I worry about, you know, if one person's unhappy, the party's ruined kind of a thing. And there is a confidence that the CEOs that I've studied and I've watched in documentaries or whatever exposure I've had in life, there's said with love, an ADD in their ability to make decisions and move forward. You know, it's really good directors have this too. I feel like, you know, in the industry, we see it all the time, people who run good production companies, but it's, you know, it's someone who can just, you know, if I'm choosing a sofa, I could spend all day deciding between the shapes, sizes, and colors, but there is something about this personality. It's like the yellow and they're done because they don't have time to worry about that anymore. And same thing with moral decisions for her, decisions that impact employee decisions, or all day long, they're just having to work off of their own instincts and speed pretty quickly. So that I admire about the character, and I find a tremendous relief. And it's just also funny. I mean, as a performer, I obviously like characters and person who's developed characters who aren't all that aware of their surroundings. I mean, Martha Stewart, my impression, my NPR characters, the middle school music teachers, you know, even someone like Sheila Shea on Suburgatory, like just didn't spend time, certainly Karen Grisham on Lady Dynamite, like all those characters are not people who spend a lot of time worrying about what other people think about them. They're pretty much in their own little myopic worldview. And Katherine has that same capacity, which I find really fun.
And you've mentioned ensemble. This show has an amazing ensemble, from top to bottom. Actually, why don't we take a look at another clip?
Okay, great.
So touchdown in Iowa, and then we tour the warehouse they're converting into the Pika factory. Then we freshen up at the hotel before a picnic luncheon.
Oh, great, a picnic. Love when my food gets to sweat in the sun for a few hours.
And then there's the official ribbon cutting ceremony at the end of the day.
God, these townies really love a chance to celebrate, don't they?
Well, this is the first factory to open there since the recession. It's a lot of new jobs. They want to express their gratitude.
Ah, it's nice. The public never really liked me when I was CEO of a drug company. I don't know why.
Probably the opioid crisis.
Maybe.
Or the price gouging on prescription drugs.
You know what? I was a girl boss. That's very tough for some people.
Again, it's a fantastic ensemble, and I want to talk more about them. But first, I want to address, I believe this is your first lead role in a series.
It is, yeah. I mean, I've been a lead on stage a fair amount, but yeah, this was my first, whatever, number one on the call sheet, blah, blah, blah. The only real difference that I've been able to discern is that everybody pronounces my name correctly. It's been a big change for me.
You must, having worked on so many different sets, you must like recognize the importance of being number one on the call sheet, and like that you kind of have to set the tone for the show.
Yeah, I would say yes, that is the most important responsibility. Obviously, it's ironic that I'm playing the CEO too, but yeah, of course, you have to be on time, you have to know your lines, and you have to treat people with, courtesy and compassion. And it's not very hard because Justin Spitzer is genuinely a lovely human being. There's not a lot of drama. And this is, a very modern workplace show. I love the diversity in our cast. I love that we're representative in a bunch of different ways. And I love that I don't know, it is a 2022 show, in that I think there's probably more respect in the workplace than there used to be. And I find that relaxing, frankly.
There are things that you learned on other sets or in other productions about, like, how you wanted to run it. I don't want to say run a set, but like how you wanted to set that tone and behave, or maybe things you learned that you knew you didn't want to do.
Well, I come from 90s comedy. There's a lot of things I don't want to do. Yeah. I mean, I am humble enough to know how hard it is to get a job. I've been at this a long time, and I, have done a lot of shows with a lot of different kinds of personalities. I love my work. It consumes me. One thing I have learned that I probably didn't know at the beginning is that, we spend our lives on the road, and we spend our lives, somewhat at the mercy of a pretty insane schedule. We miss a lot of birthday parties, weddings, and funerals for what we do. And it better be pleasant where we are. That's the one thing that as I get older, I'm just like, most of my social life is going to take place in the hair and makeup trailer and on the set at this point, for these months and months that you kind of go underground. So you may as well like the people that you're dealing with. I have to say, the cast, sort of to your point, they're enormously accomplished. They're very, very good at what they do. And they're energetic, and they're humble. And all of us, this started during the pandemic. I mean, the shutdown was the week of our first table read. So I flew to LA, I did my fitting, I met Justin, and then we went into the pandemic shutdown. So all of it feels like a gift, not to feel like, blessings or whatever, but like be cheesy. I was like, oh, well, there goes that wonderful pilot that I was so excited about doing. And then we got to do the pilot, and then we got to do 10 episodes, and now we have a second season. And so it just sort of feels like we're able to say things and do things and talk about things in an edgy way on network television that I think is really new. I can say, coming from SNL, which was the edgiest of the edgy back in the day. So this commercial episode sort of is emblematic of the a social conversation that's uncomfortable and funny. Comedy is discomfort. So it's a piece of edgy network writing, in my opinion.
It is. It's really sharp and funny. I mean, and the cast you have such great chemistry. I love John Barinholtz.
He's so funny.
Ty White, Harriet Dyer, they're all amazing. Did you know any of these people or did you just click
No,
immediately?
I didn't know anybody. And it was kind of a cool, experience. And I just, I mean, again, kudos to casting and to Justin and to the people at NBC, that thought of this kind of combination of people. Justin's incredibly open-minded. Like his roles, he doesn't even define very often by gender or, ethnicity, and he just kind of finds the right person for the job. So a lot of things fell into place in a really kind of interesting way on this show. And yeah, I feel great. I mean, I will say, like, whatever, I love comedy. So, and it's fast. It's very symphonic writing. It's very speed oriented. It's almost like, comedy Sorkin, like where he's really masterful at writing a scene where everyone's kind of moving the plot forward, but also sort of selfishly driving their own character and intentions. So it's a lot of information that moves really, really quickly. And the first time we pulled one of those scenes out, it was just like, I'm a musician, so to me, it really does feel musical. There's something symphonic or orchestral about it. Really, really fun.
And so many talented people. I'm curious,
Yes.
does he let you improvise? Do you like improvising in a scripted show?
Okay, so yes, it's again, not blowing smoke, not lying. He's the most generous showrunner about improv that I've ever worked with. The irony being the least necessary. They're like Rubik's cubes. They're like scripted Curb Your Enthusiasm scripts in that they have these little, very rarely do our episodes go from like A story, B story, A story, B story. They often go A, B, C, D back to A. There's something that sort of takes you, and he's the whole, what I love about the first season, there is a season arc that has a really satisfying sense of like cliffhanger for next season and character development and whatever. So there's a lot happening just from a structural standpoint. And improvisation, you would think, would be frowned upon because you really have all of that information is so vital to getting to the end of the episode. That said, I guess 10 years in a writer's room like The Office, he will always let the best joke play. So when we get our dialogue out, there's so many good improvisers in our group. And everyone, X Mayo is an incredible improviser. John's an incredible improviser. Humphrey Ucara is an amazing improviser. So he basically just lets us run. And if a better joke falls, he uses it a lot. Like I'm always surprised because as an actor, you watch your final cut. I never expect a single joke that I thought was so hilarious to make it. He uses them almost always. So he's like, hey, the best joke wins. I don't care. Like as long as my information's out, I'll use it. He's very generous that way. And it makes it fun.
So you do watch the final episodes because I know a lot of actors who do not like to watch themselves at all.
I can be that way. I obnoxiously adore this show. Like my family gathers around and literally because there's also, it is a workplace comedy. So my 14-year-old likes it and my 20, and I was nervous, but during the pandemic, my kids, like so many, binged on everything from The Office all the way through Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So they have like the NBC thing, and I was worried that they would judge it, but they loved it immediately. And my husband works, in corporate America, so he and his really find this to be a delightful show. They feel seen. Yeah, it's important that the C-suite feel seen. They can't have everything. Oh, they can. Sorry, they can't have everything.
That's so cool that you can all watch it together. Has your family been able to watch a lot of your stuff together? Like, do they go back and watch the old Saturday Night Live bits? I would think maybe Suburgatory would be a good one.
Yeah, everybody sort of, they watch a few. I mean, Saturday Night Live more and more we watch because the vintage episodes are now on Peacock. So it's actually really fun. You can also I just every blue moon have like a righteous old lady moment where I become infuriated by TikTok comedy and somebody thinking that like a terrible TikTok is an actual sketch. And I'm like, we're watching sketches, everybody gather around. And I sit there and I make, I Hugh colon blow, like whatever it is. I just make everybody watch like all of, what up with that, whatever. So I sit there and I force them to watch the last 30 years of Saturday Night Live. And sometimes those are my sketches. And sometimes they're more often than not people that I worked with that I admire. So, because there's certain kinds of comedic genius too, just from SNL that I want to expose my children to, and again, so much of TikTok is, now I'm off on a tangent, but is just me and my camera. And there's ensemble work that is just, there's something about watching a premise and a bunch of people react to it and having a good time, you know what I mean? So And then the real family friendly fare I've done are these live musicals, because I did Grease Live and I did Christmas Story Live and stuff like that. So we definitely watch those, those kind of things. But American Auto, I think it's really smart. Again, it's a satisfying 22 minutes of television. So much to my surprise, my neighbors and my family really love it. And so we do watch it together.
I just think it's so telling when talking about Great Saturday Night Live sketches. You mentioned two that you're not in. Rather than ones that you're in.
Fair. Which ones that I'm in would be the ones that I would get to watch? I mean, there's a lot of, so much of what I did, unfortunately, fortunately, but not fortunate for reruns, is musical, which means it's expensive for re-airing. So for example, there's not a lot of the middle school music teachers available on Peacock because nobody wants to pay for the music rights, which is understandable. Wish I'd thought of that back then. But then, so there are a few hilarious there's a diva that I did, this woman, Deandra Wells, who was, like a great 80s song beltress. And she's on Peacock. I made my family watch that with me. It's really a fantastic sketch with Conan O'Brien as my son. But this Deandra was like always talking about love to the audience, but incredibly abusive to her band on stage. And so and then she would write these just cheesy songs about love. So those are hilarious and delightful. And those were on last summer. We watched those. Sarah Blazen's an old Broadway dame. Again, they're not like famous characters. They're characters I maybe did twice or 3 times. But so I have fun watching some of those lesser known things. I'm, fortunate because my probably biggest sketches by complete accident were Christmas sketches. So I had Martha Stewart's Topless Christmas and the Sweaty Balls sketch, of course. So they tend to air every Christmas. And then there's a family dinner scene that airs every Thanksgiving. And I think Martha Stewart Thanksgiving. So I have sort of like a seasonal vibe that people know me better for.
I think you might be the reason that I first learned the term passive aggressive.
Sure, that works.
Because you had a character who was like an expert in passive aggression. And
I play a lot of passive aggressive people, yeah.
Oh. So you mentioned earlier that American Auto's already picked up for a season 2.
Yeah.
What do you know? What can you tell us?
I don't know much because they're still assembling the room, but I know that, there's so much to explore. Really, it's making, I wouldn't say making fun of, but it is. It's a comedy set at the corporate headquarters of a major automotive company. So there are so many kind of places that we can go in terms of the ethics of this recall. We ended season 1 with Catherine's kind of announcing her core competency, which is scandal. And that is because she comes from pharma. So I'm really excited to hear about some of the pharmaceutical scandals that she did withstand, because God only knows what headless wonders came from that, and the glibness. And like I said, the actuary conversations about the cost of a human life. And it's going to be, an amazing display of CYA technique, which is what her specialty is. There's also just relevant issues. There's supply chain issues, there's e-car issues, there are environmental car issues. So there's stuff that we can definitely explore. We haven't even touched upon the fact that every major automotive company has a car in NASCAR races and Formula One driving. Like it's just a cool world to explore, basically.
I find myself liking Katherine, so like I want her
to
grow, but not too much because she's so funny where she is.
I hope so. Yeah, I think it is a matter of that. It's funny, we were at I won this awesome comedy award at Banff World Media Festival, and Justin introduced me. But again, it was just like a big gala with like a voiceover guy and there were all these kind of vanity packages, basically, of these producers that were being honored for X, Y, and Z. And he was like, I really want Katherine to be acknowledged for some kind of humanitarian award, and we were laughing. Just again, the vanity is always such a fun piece of who she is, and the sort of reframe to whatever audience is listening. So it would be fun to see like what charity she gets behind, or, I would love to see her try to hawk a bestseller. I'm sure she wants to run for office. There's a lot of like female girl power CEO stuff I can see her taking advantage of. And I think you're right. I don't think she'll ever become, it would be boring. Like you're watching a comedy, you don't want to watch somebody who's just like kind of good at their job.
And a good person.
And a really, really good person.
You're not going to have an episode where her heart grows 3 sizes. suddenly.
I don't think so. That doesn't strike me as something Justin would do.
So we always like to ask our guests, in case someone hasn't had a chance to watch American Auto yet, what's the one thing that comes to mind that might entice them to start binging the series right now?
I think it's really socially relevant. I mean, I think it's really, it's a workplace comedy for 2022. I just don't, you know, I know there's all these conversations like network comedy's back, and I know this has been sort of the dialogue, but I think that is true. And I think this looks and feels like a place that we would go to work in 2022. I think that there are people of all shapes, sizes, and colors. It is not didactic. It is not a social justice show. It's not out to prove a point, but it talks about a lot of things that we're all talking about. It's, you know, for everything from posting a rainbow square and how badly that can go, you know, to racism and AI. I mean, it's really interesting. There's some very valid and kind of, you know, what's it like to have a lady boss? And is that a normal thing that we make noise about? Or is it completely, you know, run of the mill? Or, you know, so that, I don't know if that's the right answer. And you know, cars, my hair is fantastic.
Hair is amazing.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you. But I mean, my hair on the show is like Emmy hair, as I can. It is. He does it. James Dunham is my hairdresser, and he's really committed to the craft. Let me just say.
The episode that we watched the clip from, the first clip is the episode is called Commercial.
Yes.
And it's so sharp and funny. And I think it's so indicative of like those unexpected places it goes. And I don't want to say it's almost making, well, I mean, it is, it's kind of making fun of virtue signaling.
100%.
It does it in a clever way, because you hear lots of people complain about like cancel culture,
right?
And this like addresses it in like in a really fun, accessible way.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's my favorite episode by far from last season. I think it's so smartly written, and it just treads the line of discomfort. I mean, while we were making it, we're like, we could get canceled for making this, or people will really like it. And I've been delighted by the response to it. I feel like people. It just addresses something I haven't seen on television before, I guess, as a comedic conversation about being on the right side of things.
And all my actor friends love how they go about casting the commercial. They love seeing what's behind the scenes. So apparently it's very accurate. So.
Yes, I've heard the same thing.
Well, again, it's such a fantastic show. I want to thank our friends at NBC and thank Anna for joining us today. And everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us for today's Half Hour With.
Thank you so much for having me. I really love the show, so I'm so pleased to be able to talk about it.